Hello, welcome to Read Scholars Live. I'm your host, Dr. Mary Fleming, and current president of Read Scholars. Today, I am joined by Elana Kieffer, who is the acting director for the Center of Healthy Aging at the New York Academy of Medicine. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited to talk to you today and glad you could join us. So just tell us a little bit about how New York finds you these days.
Oh, doing okay. I feel like we're getting over the hump. I'm already vaccinated, which I feel very grateful about, and I'm actually taking my first out-of-state trip this weekend since before COVID started. So I'm in a good mood today. Looking
Good.
forward to that. Yes,
I like it. Travel feels so much different these days. So definitely have to take those opportunities when we can.
absolutely.
So I'd like to start with just a little bit about your journey. Tell us why you're excited about working with older adults and kind of what led you to the New York Academy of Medicine.
Absolutely. So I've always had a pull towards older adults from the time I was a little girl. When I was, I think, 7 years old, my class visited a local nursing home, and I think I liked it more than everybody else in my class. And I was also very lucky to know all four of my grandparents, and one in particular who lived the longest in my life and just died in September. My grandmother Esther, she was just very influential in my life, and embodied many of the traits that we talk about when we talk about healthy or successful aging. So I always had a positive model of aging, which unfortunately we often don't have in our society. And then when I was in college, I was working a work study job at an office that had nothing to do with aging, but next door to my office was the Lifelong Learning Institute at the university I went to, and I became friendly with the director there. And as I was choosing my major and figuring out what to do with my life, I told her that I, always had a fondness for the field of aging, and she said, "Well, you can actually work in that field." And that was a light bulb moment. And there was no gerontology major. There was nothing kind of formal that I knew about, but I knew right then, as soon as she said it, that is exactly what I was meant to do. And so I took whatever aging classes I could on campus. I went to Brandeis University outside of Boston, and then when I graduated, I found the first job I could in the field of aging, and I've never left.
I love it. I love it. I share with you a fondness for my grandparents. I still have one living grandparent who's 94. He'll be 94
Wow.
this year. And my mother's mother was my best friend. Loved her. And we lost her a few years ago. But I definitely share that sentiment. And my grandfather, the 94-year-old, has 5 siblings who are, I think they're between 87 and 96. So
Wow, good genes.
yeah. But we are as a family kind of going through, what that means to have
Yes.
that, they're great. I mean, all are doing relatively well to be that age, but comes
Yeah.
with some
But still,
challenges, right? So
absolutely. Absolutely.
and so kind of and take us through that. So, I know people talk about the baby boomers all the time,
Hmm.
just because they're such a big generation and now they are, of course, aging. But tell us a little bit about why it's important to think about that population specifically and what challenges are unique to them that, might not affect the millennials and the whatever we are, Generation X, Y, Z,
Right.
or I don't know.
Right. So, right, there's a lot of talk about, the boom of baby boomers and the graying of America.
Right.
Those unfortunately tend to have negative connotations, which I don't always appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, as you just said, with your example with your family, that people are just living much longer and relatively healthier.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just a lot more time to be spent than previous generations had, when people retire. And so there's both kind of like, there are many challenges and opportunities. One is just kind of like, how do you fill your time? How do you make that time feel kind of useful and enjoyable and productive, if that's how you want to feel? But there are also, many medical advances that are helping to keep people living longer, but those also come with challenges because they might have side effects, or there might be housing issues or affordability issues. There's also, I think we saw very clearly during COVID, but this was an issue well before that, the digital divide.
Yes.
So as we move as a society and as a world to more and more and more digital every single day, we are leaving behind this generation that did not grow up on computers and did not grow up, thinking that a mouse was anything other than what ran across your floor. Like all these things that my generation and many generations take for granted, do not come naturally to many older adults. And there has certainly been incredible progress in working in bridging that divide for older adults, but we have a very long way to go.
And, and I think we've talked a lot on this podcast about COVID, of course, because you can't not talk about COVID in 2020 and 2021. But, I think to highlight what you just said, more so than anything, with all the challenges of COVID, it just highlighted these disparities that were already there, right?
Correct.
And so now we have even greater opportunity to address them. So I know that at the New York Academy of Medicine, y'all have been doing some innovative work around trying to figure out where services are and how to, best match, different populations with the services they might need. So would you like to share a little bit about that?
Yes, I would. So we've been doing a lot of work for many years related to, to ensuring the health and well-being of both current and future aging populations, with the focus on New York City, as well as New York State, as well as beyond.
Right.
And we have a number of different projects that we've worked on and tools that we've created to address that. We have our Image NYC Math, which is an interactive map of aging that shows a very wide variety of sociodemographics of older adults, because they are, of course, not a monolith. There are many different types of older adults in many different types of ways, and even changes within just the age range. So a 75-year-old may have very different needs than a 95-year-old. So we don't want to just lump them all together, right. As well as the many other sociodemographic characteristics that we talk about when we talk about health equity. And so the map shows those sociodemographic characteristics with an overlay of available services and resources that are geared towards older adults, both so that we can see where the services are and also where they're not. And so that as city planners and funders, and as case managers and as physicians and all these different types of professionals that interact with older adults and work for them, they can know where the gaps are. And they can also know where to point people where services do exist. And even outside of services, it just kind of helps to predict if we see that there's a neighborhood, let's just say within New York City, that is a very high proportion of low income older adults who primarily speak Spanish. I want to be thinking as in any one of those professions, how can I help that neighborhood and what services do they need for that particular neighborhood, given those different needs? And this map helps us view that and plan for the future.
I like it. I think that, as we've started talking about geo mapping, I guess, over the past several years, and I guess it's probably been more than several years now, but how we continue to use that information in useful ways, and now more interactive ways, that it's not just for, academics or researchers or that type of thing, that we can make it accessible to people, both professionally, but also, like you said, just if I needed to figure out where the local library is that's closest to my grandmother's house, that would be a way that I could do that too. So I think that's helpful. The other thing you mentioned a few minutes ago about this, this time from retirement to beyond, we'll say, and people trying to fill their time. And so my another interesting side story about my family. So my mother helps with one of our neighbors, and he's also 94, I think 95. He, sometimes goes to a center where he can spend time with other people and interact and, just socialize. But, those things get a little bit more challenging with mobility and transportation. But socialization is still important, right?
Absolutely.
And so I know you also worked with kind of older leaders in the local areas and try to put those people together. So one is an expression of, you can fill your time doing very powerful work, even though you're retired. But how did y'all facilitate that? And why is it important to speak directly to the population about their needs and how they want to organize?
Absolutely. Well, I think the short answer to your second question is that they know best.
Yes.
I'm in my 30s, so I can't answer those questions as easily as someone in that age bracket can. But at the New York Academy of Medicine, we've been working with what are called age-friendly neighborhood organizations for at least 10 years now. And those are really resident-driven organizations that are volunteer-led, typically, that are focused on neighborhoods throughout New York City that really try to implement what we call age-friendly practices and policies to make the neighborhoods great places really for everybody to live, because age-friendly practices and policies help everybody. So a common example we use is that if a street block has, if we implement a curb cut, let's say, on a street block to help with somebody who uses a walker, that's also going to help a parent that is using a baby carriage. So many age-friendly changes we all have benefited from. I mean, I know the when you cross the street and there's the timer, you know, they've implemented the timer, that helps me, and it would have probably also helped my grandmother as well. So, but the key is that we want to hear from the older adults themselves and from their older neighbors that they talk to about what changes need to be made, what's going well in the neighborhoods, what can other neighborhoods learn from neighborhoods that are making those neighborhoods good places for older adults to age in place, because the vast majority of older adults live at home. We've been talking a lot in COVID about long-term care facilities and nursing homes that have obviously gone through a very, very difficult year. But the truth is, it's only about 4% of the American older population actually lives in nursing homes. So the vast, vast majority are living on their own. They're living with family members, they're living with friends, they're living in all different types of situations where there's not built-in support. And so we need to come together as a neighborhood and as a community to ensure that they can age in place for as long as possible.
I like it. I like it. And I hopefully, we'll keep having these conversations in a broader context, because the reality is we can't get around it, right? So
that's right.
And if we want those things for us, we should make sure that they are readily available as soon as possible for those who need them now. So it's exciting that there are these innovations that are kind of coming down the pike and that people are talking about them. As I mentioned, we can't quite get away from COVID yet. So just because this is kind of a present conversation, can you speak any to concerns about the COVID vaccine and the older adults in general, and those challenges, and where you see challenges and where you're optimistic kind of going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So New York State in particular did a good job of prioritizing older adults when the vaccine first became available. And we do a lot of work with nursing homes throughout the state, and they had vaccine clinics as soon as possible. And overall, they were quite successful in vaccinating older residents in those facilities. I think for older residents, again, the majority of whom do not live in facilities, it's, I think that New York State, at least I can speak for, has done a pretty good job of that. And there are a number of transportation services that are available for free to bring people from their homes to vaccine clinics, because as you pointed out, that can be a real barrier. There are also many older adults that cannot leave their homes for one reason or another. And so I know the city in particular has been working hard to bring the vaccine to people's homes. And even with, it was originally the Johnson & Johnson vaccine because it's one dose. And even though that's now on pause, they just alerted us yesterday that they are starting to do that with the Moderna vaccine. Okay. So they're, I would just say the city and the state at least are working very hard on getting the vaccine. From anecdotal evidence from older adults I've spoken to, the majority are very eager to just get it and to be able to, walk outside freely with a mask on, but at least to be able to, just because I think older adults in particular, because they were at such high risk, stayed in even more than the majority of us. And most importantly, to see their family and their friends and their loved ones. But there's still some concern, there's still, as people age, they often do have chronic conditions and might have, and the idea of this kind of new vaccine, there's just some concern. And so we try to address that concern and validate the concern, and also assure them that it is a very safe and effective vaccine that went through all of the regulatory oversight that other vaccines have gone through, just on a speedier basis, because everybody was eager to get the vaccine ready to go and in use. So I think overall, especially now that we're a year in, I would say it's been going relatively well.
Good to hear. Good to hear. And, like you, I'm excited about being vaccinated and being able to move around a little bit more freely, still cautiously, still following all the, cautionary recommendations, but it is nice to be able to see friends and family again. So
absolutely.
So as kind of as we close, I usually like to ask, just as a moment of optimism, what are you looking forward to? What are you optimistic about, but either personally or professionally, kind of moving forward in 2021?
One of the silver linings of COVID has been that it has actually brought to light the, again, challenges and opportunities of older adults, broadly speaking, really around the world. And so people are now talking about it more. The nursing home is a buzzword now, which it never used to be, right. For better and for worse, but it's still much better that we talk about it than that we avoid it. And so I'm just happy that more of my friends are asking me questions about older adults that they never had before. And I just think it's become more of a public conversation about aging. And I think it's also honestly, unfortunately, forced all of us to think about our own mortality. And, but I think on the flip side, it means that I have, again, anecdotally sensed that people are more open to talking about conversations related to their own advanced care planning and end of life wishes, because we've all unfortunately seen death more close up in our eyes. And so it kind of has forced us all to think about those questions we don't like to think about or talk about. And I think that there's really been overall really a sense of kind of caring and concern for older adults, because they have on a whole suffered more from social isolation, especially because of the digital divide, and also just, wanting to stay home and safe even more than a 24-year-old, let's say. Right. And so people I think have been calling their grandparents more often. They've been teaching their, older loved ones how to use Zoom. I know that I did that with my grandmother. And it included,
fun, but also challenge.
That is for sure. I had to say, if our Zoom call was going to be for 12 o'clock, I always got on at 11:45 by phone to talk her through how to click on the link. But again, it's much better to be doing these things and having these conversations than not. And so I think that we will continue to do that, because we've seen the light in that respect. And I think that older adults feel more seen and heard and visible than they did before.
I like it. I agree. I think there are definitely some silver linings, and I hope the conversation continues. And I hope that we continue to be connected. I think we are appreciating our connectivity even more when we were forced to be apart for so long. So
absolutely.
But thank you so much. I enjoyed talking to you today. Look
you.
forward to seeing what else is on the horizon for you and the New York Academy of Medicine in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Read Scholars Live. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or subscribe to our YouTube channel.